So can we welcome please Kanna Ingleson, who's going to talk to us about crop circles.
To know that throughout your entire talk, my wife has been giving me the side eye about this ADHD thing, and she started by just looking at me like this, and she ended up by saying, "Yes, I think that's you." So this is quite interesting actually, because what this is going to be, this talk is going to be about my own area of hyper-focus. So if you ever need proof that this might be a situation with me, this might be the big reveal. Now what happened was, about 11 years ago, summer of 2007, I decided that I needed a holiday. So I was about to book a trip to Wiltshire for 4 days, and I was looking at the itinerary, and it said Avebury Stone Circle, Stonehenge, Silbury Hill, all these amazing things. And I was about to press the button where it said at the bottom that this trip included free or included tickets to the Crop Circle conference in Marlborough. And I thought, I'm not actually doing this trip at all. I need to get to this conference. I'd heard about crop circles. I'd never seen one, but I absolutely knew that this was the thing I had to do. Talking about finding my people and getting involved in micro niches. This was exactly what I wanted to do. I think I might have been the first person who went to a crop circle conference not having actually seen a crop circle before. But that's how it started. So this is the story of my life, I'll have you know. So what I'd like to tell you before we launch into this remarkable story, which has so many layers you just won't believe it, was that a crop circle is basically made up of bent plants. That is it. There's nothing broken, there's nothing mown, there's nothing cut. It's literally patterns made up of bent plants. The plants could be wheat, traditionally it's wheat. It could be barley, it could be canola. They're all different kinds of textures and plants, but it also means that the season for crop circles can be quite long because the one comes after the other. Okay, so that's what it is. They're bent plants. Crop circles started off very simply and got more and more complex as time went on. So in case, just before we show you some of those, just in case you want more of my hyper-focus credentials, these are my crop circle books. They really are. And the sharp-eyed among you, Rod, will realize that there are some duplicates there, because some are hard covers and some are soft covers, and some have slightly different revisions, some have others. So I collected the whole set. Some of them are from the early days of crop circles as we know them, which is around about the late 80s, early 90s, and the whole sort of subculture is documented very well in these books. I also have a bunch of magazines which are incredibly technical. This is not a fanzine kind of a thing. These are people with reputations and degrees and careers and nice suits and things like that who really do research this in the most incredible way. And it's drawings and measurements and all sorts of things. So this is a serious business. And I'll show you, it's serious enough to have an actual painting in my house of a crop circle, and that's basically how we roll. I'm going to show you my favourite crop circle. Okay, my favourite crop circle is not necessarily the most complex or the most beautiful, but I'll tell you why this is my favourite. It's huge. The thing you need to know about these is that they are absolutely huge. You've got no idea how big they are. And we have some interesting landmarks here. We've got some burial mounds. And that's also very relevant for this part of the country, which is in Wiltshire. Lots of ancient landmarks which add to the whole mystique of the area. And the thing about this crop circle that makes it my favourite is the absolute precision of it. I mean, if you just look, it just kind of touches this mound, it touches that one, and it really does fit really perfectly into the landscape. And I've always thought that that's a jolly good crop circle. Now, this is also a good opportunity to discuss with you how this whole subculture works, right? So you've got people, you've got three camps. You've got believers, right? Believers will tell you that there's no way on earth that a person or man could make this, right? So it's therefore supernatural. It could be aliens, it could be some sort of supernatural force, but it's not people. And there's a whole bunch of things that it could be, but definitely not guys with planks or anything like that, because in no way could it ever be like that. Okay, so you've got those people, the believers, and they're the ones that have the conferences and the calendars and the postcards, and they basically make all the money. So that's one thing to understand. And on this side, you've got the circle makers themselves, the teams of people who go out with planks and things like that and actually make these things for real. So that's the story. And then the third camp you've got are the farmers. who have historically been so incredibly pissed off with this because not only do people trespass and then vandalize their crop, and I'm talking, this is huge, this is not trivial, this is not loads of crop that's been flattened. Now you could argue that you could still harvest that crop and it would be fine, but when people like me and all my mates from London and various other places come traipsing through the field thinking it's a public place, that's what causes the damage, that's what causes people to be upset, and they are just totally, this is the last thing they need. So there's been lots of attempts to get farmers on side with honesty boxes and collecting money, and it's just not worked. So what farmers do now is they just mow them out. So you can't see crop circles anymore because they just don't want it happening anymore. So that's a good example of how the whole subculture works. It's these three camps of people. I will tell you straight up, you know, that when you go into a field, it's usually full of scientists and fruitcakes and people like that. And I do very much self-identify as a fruitcake. So I'm not a researcher. I also don't think aliens have anything to do with anything, and certainly not crop circles. So I will just tell you that that's where I am on this thing. And that's going to filter the conversation I'm going to have with you tonight, because somebody in another camp will have a different conversation and they will have a whole different perspective on it. But I'm going to tell you how it was for me as a person who is not a believer. All right? I'll give you another example of a really good crop circle. This was one of the last ones that I saw. This is bloody magnificent. There's something utterly magical about crop circles, and I use that word deliberately and intentionally. It is absolutely magical, and it's so easy to get sucked into all this mystique because it's just the most incredible thing. And when you see a crop circle from the top, or you're actually in a crop circle, it is again an entirely different experience. So that's what it looks like, sort of nearer the ground. And people take photographs in all sorts of ways, and I'll show you pictures of how you actually get these pictures later on. So that's a little bit of a scene setter. That's what they look like, sort of the last ones. Utterly magnificent, very clever, and very definitely made by guys with planks and GPSs and things like that. Okay, so here I am. I've got my little badge. Why not call this badge? Because I think it's like a really cool thing to have. Badge for my crop circle conference. I actually had a job interview just prior to this, and it was a city job. This was a long time ago, 11 years ago, and it was going really well, and they looked like they were going to employ me, and they said, well, could I start on the Monday? And the Monday is like, no, I can't start on the Monday, because I'm going to a crop circle conference, you see. So now, while I wouldn't sort of advise that you say that in a job interview, for me it kind of worked, because they were just as crazy as me, or at least I found that out later. And so yes, I got to start on the Tuesday because I was doing this thing on the Monday. So this is me going to the crop circle conference, and this is where, again, I discovered so many layers. This is not, what you see is not what you get with this. And the thing that muddies the water is that weird shit does happen in these fields, for real, okay? And I'm going to show you a little bit of that. So it does make it really a tricky thing. Okay, so here we are. We're in a crop circle, and it was not a particularly good crop circle, so, you know, I was hoping for something a little bit spectacular. It wasn't. But anyway, we've got this woman here who's called Francine Blake. She's one of the people who was very much part of the crop circles conference set. She's nice. I like all of these people. They're wonderful, kind, lovely people who know what they're talking about, but they are believers, okay? So I'll just say it about her. So what she's doing there is she is actually looking at a stem, and she is basically analysing and teaching us how to check if this crop circle is genuine or hoax, right? A hoax being man-made, all right, and genuine being supernaturally, you know, put down there. And she's looking at the base of the stem. There's some nodes on the base of the stem, and here's what she's seeing, right? And this actually does happen. So in some cases you get bent nodes, where literally as soon as the crop circle occurs, it bends. It absolutely bends. It doesn't break, it doesn't do anything, it bends. And that's what they look like. So you think, okay, now this is quite an interesting thing. Sometimes you get elongated nodes, and that's exactly what they look like, and I've seen them myself. Only in the crop circle will you find that. And at the top, the holy grail, is sometimes you get blown nodes. So the nodes actually got holes where the nodes used to be. And that's obviously proof that it's about microwave energy and heat and all sorts of things that have got nothing to do with plants. Now, I know this happens, and I can't tell you why it happens, but I do know that, you know, there are no aliens involved. Okay, so that's really interesting. So you'll find lots of talks and, you know, things on the internet about people teaching you about how to know, how to identify a real crop circle. And here are some of the characteristics of a real crop circle. Some researchers will have you know that you get burnt corn in some of them. Now, I've not seen that myself, so I can't verify that that actually happens. But I can verify that sometimes the next season you'll get a ghost image of a previous crop circle. And that's interesting because they've harvested the crop, they've planted a new one, and yet this happens. And that's clearly proof of all sorts of weird things. It's actually a very interesting thing to see. The intricacy of the lay is often referred to as something that people couldn't possibly do. And it is genuinely extremely beautiful, and you even have basket weave type patterns. And it is lovely, and it is hard to understand how people do it, but they do it. Now, I'll tell you, I've been in a crop circle, this is the true story, where when you go into the crop circle, all your camera equipment and phones just fail. They just go dead. And when you go out of the crop circle, they work again. So I've seen that, it's happened to me, and I can't explain it. In the Wiltshire countryside, you do get light anomalies. You do get things that show up on your camera that you didn't photograph. You do get little balls of light that you can actually see on the landscape, and you can film it, and these things happen. The circle makers themselves will tell you that sometimes when they're in the field, they lose track of the number of people that are in the field with them. It looks like there are more people than they should be. Sometimes they lose track of time, where they're running out of time, it's about to get light, and suddenly they feel like they've got more time than they thought they had, and suddenly the crop circle is complete. So these weird things do definitely happen, and it kind of makes the whole thing far more interesting than you might imagine. So in case you were wondering how some of these photographs are taken of crop circles, literally guys with poles with cameras on the top. Nowadays they use drones, so that's a lot easier. And this is what they do in the past. They had helicopters and things like that. And a guy called Steve Alexander has taken the most magnificent photographs of crop circles for many years. And he is the go-to guy with the most fantastic archive, and he used helicopters. Right, the other thing that they do to explain to you that this is a real thing is that they will set up false premises, or false dilemmas. And they will say things at the conferences like, well, you never ever see, the night is really short in the summer, and, it just happens in one night. It never happens over 2 or 3 nights. And here we've got proof that it happens over 2 or 3 nights. They say things like, it is impossible to do this at night when it's dark in a field and you can't see your hand in front of your face. And the circle makers will tell you it's remarkably light. It's incredibly light in a field. You will not believe how light it can be with the moon. And it's all just nonsense. So if someone with a title and a degree and a reputation tells you it is impossible, people tend to believe that. And it's actually quite hard sometimes to resist. And I will tell you that where I got to with this. There was a time, I haven't publicly admitted this before, but there was a time where I did think that it wasn't guys with clamps, right? I didn't think they were aliens, but I thought that maybe sort of there's a military base nearby and they're experimenting with some kind of thing or some kind of energy or whatever because of the blown nodes and all those things. So I thought there was possibly another thing going on. And everyone was very happy about us crop circle people talking about it because we were off the scent. But no, I came to my senses quite quickly after that, and after having sort of found out who the circle makers were and finding out a bit about their story. So yeah, it was. It's an interesting how people will believe something if you just say it is impossible to, and they don't actually question it. It is also interesting how an expression of art, in this case, which is what I believe this to be, can actually develop myth and stories and belief systems around it. And you can almost imagine like a religion coming out of it. And there are people that talk about these as being temples and things like that. So, you could have stuff like that. When I was at a crop circle conference, because I'm not a believer, I couldn't say anything, so I just had to keep my trap shut and listen. It actually almost resembled a sort of a happy-clappy church environment. It really was a bit like that. So we went on a visit to the fields, and they were going to say, you're going to feel all sorts of energy, you're going to feel this, and you're going to see this. And I thought, okay, let's go. And I was talking to a woman who was a farmer, a dairy farmer from New Zealand. And I said to her, I'm not feeling a whole lot. She says, oh, I'm so glad you said that. I'm not feeling anything either. She says, what did you want to say? I said, no, I can say it. It's not happening for me either. She says, it feels a bit like the church of the crop circle, doesn't it? That's exactly what it is. So it was actually very interesting to find a kindred spirit in that environment. So actually, what I'm going to tell you now in closing is how this all came about. Why are there crop circles and how did it start and how did we get to this point and why aren't they there anymore? So briefly, now okay, this is where the believers will tell you a whole different story. This is kind of like blasphemy that I'm going to tell you now. Right? In 1976 there were two guys called Doug and Dave, and they were artists who lived in Southampton, and one of them had Australian connections, and he had been to Australia where his family lived, and they'd seen, this is in the 70s, and they'd seen an article about a farmer who had seen a UFO come down on his farm, and then was pictured in the paper with this flattened grass the next day. So these guys thought it would be a laugh to come to Berkshire and kind of put down a few of these and see what happened. And they did a few and no one saw them, so they thought they'd do it in the valley where it was much more visible. And suddenly people saw them and people really, got involved with them. The press were there and everyone was looking at it, and these guys did more. And you'll actually see on his hat, he's actually got a piece of wire with a circle hanging off it. So that's like his device for making straight lines and things. That's how technical it was or it wasn't. And they had planks and they did their thing. And they started like this, so they were supposed to look like UFO landing sites, and very, very simple. And then they, sort of a little bit more with a few others, and they were getting a bit ahead of themselves maybe, but that's what they were doing. And then guys like this, Colin Andrews, set up research stations in the fields to measure magnetism, electricity. And this was real state-of-the-art stuff. There were TV crews from Japan mainly, but everywhere people came to see. There were all sorts of researchers. He was the main one. There was another guy called Pat Delgado. All of them have written books. A guy with a plane called Busty Taylor who used to take the pictures, and it was all amazing. And the other guy was Terence Meaden. Terence Meaden, again, highly educated meteorologist, Oxford educated, I believe, doctor, and he was explaining that these circles were made by weather events, vortices, and they were not just any vortices, they were basically, I think, electrified or something like that. And I've got a book of his where he's got all drawings showing everything. I've actually seen a reference in one of the articles I read where they referred to a paper where apparently Stephen Hawking said at the time, this is allegedly, that crop circles, which are these ones here, are either hoaxed, made by people, or they are indeed weather events. So that's apparently what he said, okay? So this gives this guy lots of credibility, and he's the hero of the moment because it's the only logical explanation. And then things happened with straight lines. Like so that didn't work so well anymore because suddenly you've got straight lines and now your vortex theory has to be amended. So he did that a couple of times, and then you had these little twiddles on the end and disappeared with the seats, and his credibility was shot to pieces. But this is what was going on, and then as if there wasn't enough fuel to the fire, we have a Led Zeppelin album showing the East Field, one of the crop circles, and then the whole world got interested in the thing. And basically people started making circles as the seasons progressed, so they became better. As the years passed by, they had more equipment, they had GPSs, handheld GPSs, and they were able to do much, much better things. So every year things just got better because the same people were doing things just much more skillfully. So that's basically how that worked. In 1991, these guys came out of the closet and said, look guys, we actually have been doing all of this, and we'll show you how we've been doing it, and it was us all along, and just, silly you. And that's when everything got totally divided, and they said, oh no, these guys are liars, such liars are they. Of course it wasn't them. And even when they demonstrated in broad daylight, they said, we have done our tests with the stems, and this is not genuine, this is fake. So they said in the end, we wish we had never actually said anything because it was much more hassle than it was worth. But even now, mentioning Doug and Dave within this subculture is not something you do, lightly. Okay, so despite all that, things went ahead and we had fractals, really beautiful big ones, fractals and all sorts of things. We had this one which was called the sunflower. It is huge, it is magnificent, it is magical, it is absolutely magical, there's no other word for it. And when you're in it, it's just stunning. Then you get these, okay? Now this is a proper message, right? This is like there's books written about this crop circle, right? And there's another one where they have like sort of DNA codes and things like that. Books have been written about single crop circles because the whole thing now is that there's a message. Of course there's a message. And it's only these few anointed people who know what they are, and you have people who are specialists in sacred geometry and all kinds of things who will tell you things. And they will say, these designs have never been thought of by anyone before, they are completely unique. So yes, this is wonderful and it's totally supernatural. So this is the kind of thing that you would see in the field, and they really were very impressive. This was one of my favorites. It is really, really huge. If you were to see people, then there'd be dots on that landscape. Really, totally, totally magnificent. And then my dad said, do you remember that conference you went to, that crop circle conference? I found this article in a newspaper in South Africa, in fact an Afrikaans newspaper. I thought you might be interested. And then I thought, hang on. It's that guy. It's this guy. And it was. He was an airline pilot, and he had flown over crop circles his entire career, and he had an opinion on it, and now he's writing in the South African paper as an expert on crop circles. And it's the whole principle that if you know more than most of the population, you become an expert. And in this micro niche, it's not hard to do. So yes, he became an expert. It was very interesting to see how the same faces kind of come and go all the time. So that was really very interesting. So you might ask, before we go to questions, what happened? Why are there no crop circles anymore? Well, basically, the believers made all the money, and they weren't talking to each other. It was totally political, totally divisive. They wouldn't let circle makers come to their conferences. They chucked them out because you may not come here and change this environment. And it was actually quite literally like that. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what it was. And so the circle makers kind of got a bit pissed off with this. So they said, okay, this season, this was a few seasons ago, we're going to mess with you guys. Instead of putting them all in one area in Wiltshire where it's easy to photograph and get a helicopter, we're going to do one in Wales, and we're going to do one in Berkshire, and we're going to do one here just to mess with you. And they did that. Okay, so that was proof that circle makers were involved because they said they were going to do it, and then they did. Okay, so that was really interesting. And then basically they just got pissed off and they stopped doing it. And I think also one of the reasons why they stopped doing it is because they're all now in their 40s, and it's quite hard work, and it's not easy getting up in the middle of the night or early to do all this, and it's very, very physical, and they kind of had enough. So the whole crop circle heyday, if you like, has passed, and it was wonderful and magical while it lasted, and I'm very glad to be part of it. So if you want to ask me questions about this micro niche, I'll do my best to answer them.
Can we thank Kanna? Brilliant, brilliant. So do we have any people with planks in the audience that want to own up? Any questions? Yes, over. I'm going to come with the mic, Ken, because then you'll be picked up and the question will be heard.
How many people do you think in total were actually involved in making them? Was it a handful or was it hundreds?
No, there weren't hundreds. There were a few groups. There were two that were very prolific and very skilled that I know of. And I don't know, they were not hundreds. There were a few of them who just knew what they were doing, and they would co-opt people into helping do it. So I've seen, there was a guy, the only guy who's ever been prosecuted for creating a crop circle. He actually had a TV channel, sort of a thing he streamed from his bedroom, where he would actually interview the circle makers, and these were gone for like 4 hours at a time once a week, and of course I listened to them not once but twice, and to really find out what the story was. And there were quite a few different groups, but not a whole lot, not many. One was in London, one was London-based actually.
And has it really stopped now?
Yeah, it's stopped. You get them in other parts of the world, so they do occur here and there, and you will. But the whole sort of the heyday that was Wiltshire, which was world famous. People came from all over the world, and also lots of places in Europe, and they came. They just descended on the town and just.
I think maybe after Rod's talk, I think there's a niche for St Leonards to bring this back. As Sussex could do that. Any other questions for Kanna? Yes.
No, just speaking.
So what I want to know is, how were they done?
Literally.
The detail. I mean, the very complex ones, how were they done?
Well, they're just done with tape measures and strings and planks and rollers and things like that. It's actually really quite simple.
I worked as an art director for many years, and I can tell you that this is not an easy thing.
No, it's not an easy thing to do. Which
I would really love to know exactly how they were done. More technical details. I mean, just so you can convince them.
So do you think they were aliens then?
No, I don't. I've always been totally fascinated.
Yeah.
Because the whole thing about the nodes, I have been to a crop circle and I have seen that everything is bent at a node.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely magical.
I just want to know the technique behind it, because I'm totally fascinated. I mean, if I was told to go and make one of these, I would not know. It's so complex. I would love to know.
It is very complex, but
how can I find out? Which of those books can I find out about?
A guy you can read about, he's written a field guide, and his name is Rob Irving. He's very articulate, he's very smart, and he has some really good books on the subject. But all I can say to you is that it happened over many years, lots of practice, and they just did it better every year and over.
So you don't know?
I don't know more than what I've just told you. I don't think it's a big secret. They got GPS.
If we get the St Leonard's crop circle gang going, we'll work it out. We'll work it out. We'll get better over years.
They still.
Yeah. Isn't it possible that aliens were actually controlling? Is that plausible?
Brilliant. Any more questions? Any more questions? Yes. Let me ask.
Are there not any films of people actually doing these major crop circles? I mean,
yes.
No film photo evidence?
There are circle makers who film themselves doing things, but there are films. So there's a very famous one at Bavard Castle where someone is supposed to be filming a crop circle as it occurs. That is obviously a fake. It has been known to be a fake. People have claimed it to be fake. It's just not what they present. But there is a very famous, a very well-known DVD in the subculture where some people claim to have sort of filmed a flash of light, and then the crop circle was there afterwards. And I've attended talks by these people, and there are people who will tell you that. People say, why don't you set up CCTV cameras and actually catch a crop circle happening for real? But the fields are so vast that where would you set it up? It's an impossible thing to do. But people ask about that a lot. Show me the footage.
Question now.
Yeah.
So have you got an explanation for your loss of fraud and things?
No, and that is why this is so interesting. It actually happens. It does. These light anomalies happen. All these things do happen, and that's a fact. And that's why this is so many layers. I don't know why that happened, but it did happen.
Half in the belief pond.
Pardon?
I'm half in the belief pond.
It's quite. I came across somebody quite recently who had seen one and said, absolutely not. It's not man-made. It is so intricate. It is so beautiful. It is so feathery. It is so wonderful. It's magical. It's beautiful. It's clever.
I have a more personal question to you.
Okay.
So I can relate to you a bit because I have a really weird obsession with Easter Island and the Moai.
Okay.
Like, weird obsession.
Yeah.
But I kind of worry that I don't want to find out the mystery of like how the Moai were moved. Because how did you personally feel when you found out that this was just people making these crop cycles? Like your mystery was discovered. Was it just a little bit of an anticlimax? Like, oh, or how did you feel personally?
It's an interesting question because you're never going to get that feeling back, or that the feeling that you're part of something quite unique. I don't know. My wife would tell you I don't like surprises. I like to know the ending of books before I've read them. I want to know what happens in a film before I've seen it. I will actually ask to tell me the spoilers and the punchlines. I'm a journalist by profession, so my whole job is about finding out. So no, I think I felt almost relieved that, but it was probably the best summers of my whole life. It was that good. Yeah.
Do we have? I hesitate to ask this question. Do we have any believers in the room? You don't have to put your hands up. No, there's no hands. No hands. I don't blame you. Any final questions for Kanna before? Well, we've got her here. Any final questions, or shall we take a break? Is there
someone there?
So, on this? Oh, over here.
So you referenced Australia and then UK. What are other countries? Do they
Yes,
do a world tour?
They do occur in many different countries. A lot of them are in America, a lot in parts of Europe. They occur in a lot of places. But what made it unique here was that there were so many of them, and they were so sophisticated and so beautiful. So that was something that I'm not aware that was replicated anywhere else. People actually often say, why in that particular area? And people will say to you, one of the theories is that because it's a chalk-based soil and there are aquifers underneath and all the crop circles are where water is. But I'll tell you what it is. A lot of those fields, like Eastfield on that record cover, you can see from the road. They're low down, so you can actually see the crop circle and you don't have to sort of get in an aeroplane to see it. So if you're going to make something impressive or something artistic, you want people to see it and photograph and come talk about it. And I think that that's one of the reasons why. Also, it's a very mysterious landscape. My favourite spot on earth is Silbury Hill. It's a man-made mound that took forever to make and no one knows even why it's there. And there's a lot of mystique there. And I think it just attracted weirdos and all power to them.
Excellent. So, and we make the best crop circles, which is wonderful.
Well,
particularly as we go into a Brexit generation. So can we thank Kanna again?